Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Elizalde. How are you doing today? Good? Great. Well, thank you so much for joining my talk. I am going to talk about how the Internet of Things can help us solve some of the toughest problems in the world, including climate change, and more importantly, how we can use that technology to benefit our companies and create new channels of revenue. I'm going to start by talking about what is the IoT, or Internet of Things. Then we're going to talk about specific examples that I put together to show you how this technology can be applied in a little bit more concrete way, because sometimes we think about climate change in too abstract ways. And then I want to tell you a little bit more about how you and your company can get involved, because we need all the brain power and all the technology we can get in order to address some of these very complicated problems. I am always been fascinated by the Internet of Things, not only because the technology is cutting edge, but its ability to put together solutions to solve some of these bigger problems, and at the same time helping us increase revenue for our companies. And IoT is not necessarily a new concept. I've been working on IoT for over 20 years. In fact, I like to say that I used to be working on IoT before it was cool. I had the opportunity to work on solutions for the manufacturing industry, transportation industry, renewable energy, also advising companies on their strategy for IoT, teaching IoT strategy at Stanford University, and today, as head of IoT North America for Ericsson, I am more excited than ever to understand how we can leverage all this technology to solve some of these challenges. Now I'm going to get started from the beginning and ask this question. What is the Internet of Things? So raise your hand if you believe you have a good understanding of what is the Internet of Things. So show of hands. Okay? So that's about 5% of the audience here. And believe it or not, that is very common. We hear a lot about this very cutting-edge terms that are going to help us in many ways, but actually very few people understand how to apply them, what do they really mean, and how do we actually monetize them so that we can provide value to our companies and to our customers. Now, when I ask a lot of people about the Internet of Things, because of what we hear in the media, the first thing that comes to people's minds about IoT is something like this: a smart toaster. Or maybe it is the smart coffee maker that sends you a text message when your coffee is just right. Or perhaps it is the smart refrigerator that calls you letting you know that you're running out of milk. And yes, these are examples of the Internet of Things, but these applications are focused mostly on convenience as opposed to utility. So let's think about the different components. What makes an IoT solution? IoT as a concept, it's a network of connected devices, physical devices that have sensors that allows us to acquire data from the real world, process that data, probably locally at the edge, transmit that data through a network component to a cloud so we can store it, we can analyze it, we can run artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., and then we can expose that to our users via applications, front-end, mobile, etc. And we can also send commands from the cloud down to the applications and make them interact with the real world. So from a concept perspective, that is what the Internet of Things is. So yes, the smart toaster, of course, fits into that category. But that's really just scratching the surface. The same technology that companies can use to build a smart toaster or a smart refrigerator can be used to solve some of the bigger problems that we have in the world. Industrial applications and infrastructure type of solutions, such as energy, manufacturing, transportation, leverage the same concepts, but they apply them for different types of problems. And this is one of the key takeaways from this talk is that in order for us and our companies to monetize the Internet of Things, we have to focus on problems where there is more willingness to pay. And as much as companies that develop the consumer type of products are having some success, customers in general are not that willing to pay because the added value is not enough to justify the cost. So some of those companies can be struggling a little bit. On the other hand, infrastructure, manufacture, transportation companies, they have the need of create every day new levels of optimization. And so if they can leverage this technology to do that, they are more willing to pay for those kind of solutions. Now, at the beginning, I mentioned that IoT can help us solve climate change, or at least address it. Because let's be clear, climate change is such a complex problem that there's no one technological solution that can solve it. To address it, we're going to have to change our behaviors, we're going to have to enforce regulations, and of course, supply technology. But I want to break it down a little bit more because climate change, again, it's a very complex topic and it could be a little bit abstract. So let's talk about what is at the root that's causing climate change. And one of the main challenges that we have that is affecting climate change is population growth. According to the United Nations, by 2015, we're going to be reaching around 10 billion people. That's a tremendous explosion of population around the world. And as you can imagine, more people require more places to live, requires producing more energy, require more clean water, more food, transportation, etc. So we continue to stress this finite resources system that we have in the planet, and it's going to be a problem. And a lot of the factors that are necessary to solve some of these issues have the byproduct of affecting climate change: deforestation, modes of transportation, burning fossil fuels, etc. So let's talk about how we can use some of this technology to help. And I want to focus on, again, a very specific example so you can see how the Internet of Things can help in this kind of challenge. I grew up in Mexico City. And Mexico City is a beautiful place. It is a very vibrant place. It is known for our rich culture, our agriculture, our the traditions that we have, the warmth of our people, and of course, we are known by our food. But we're also known for other things, like air pollution. Mexico City is one of the most polluted cities in the world. And it's not getting any better. And more cities are starting to get into this pattern. I remember growing up in Mexico City as a kid, sometimes we used to have to stay at home because the government had issued warnings that it was not safe to go outside. And so as a kid, that was kind of hard to understand. Or I remember driving on the highways with my parents and looking out at the horizon where we have some beautiful volcanoes. And most of the times, you couldn't see the volcanoes because of the pollution. And so we would always play this game saying, hey, we can see the volcanoes today. It must be a clear day. So that's very, very challenging. And of course, as you can imagine, the main source for air pollution is burning fossil fuels, either for our cars or to generate the electricity that we need to power the city. So let's talk about that for a second. What kind of technology could we use to move away from burning fossil fuels? One solution, of course, is moving towards renewable sources of energy. I'm sure you've heard about solar panels, wind turbines, energy storage. And those technologies are great. And they are starting to come down in cost to the point that they're competitive with other sources of energy. But unfortunately, this technology has a lot of challenges as well. So it's not easy to just integrate them into the electricity grid. One of the biggest challenges is intermittency. If the sun is not shining, then the solar panels won't produce energy. If the wind doesn't blow, then the wind turbines won't spin. So adjusting the electric grid for that intermittency, it's a big problem. The other challenge that we have is the distributed nature of these things. The electric grid was designed as you have a central power plant that pushes energy towards the cities. But with the renewables, you can actually place them in a distributed location. So now you can start to see how the Internet of Things can help us connect all these different pieces and add the intelligence to these renewable energy devices so that they can orchestrate their production of energy, so that they can inject it to the grid when it's needed. And so if the wind is not blowing in a part of the Pacific country, then a solar farm somewhere else might be able to come to the rescue and push their energy through. And so this network of sensors, analytics at the edge, smart switches to route all this power, that's an area where the Internet of Things is having a huge impact in modernizing the way utilities and the smart grid works. But more importantly, those solutions are actually opening the door for a lot of companies, startups and big companies alike, to create new sources of revenue and new channels for their technology. Another aspect is energy storage. Electricity is one of those commodities, the only one actually, that until now we haven't been able to store. So it needs to be produced in real time. So it gets produced, and then if it's not consumed, it gets wasted. Now, with these new batteries, we can actually store the energy so that at night, for example, when the sun is not shining, we can go and ping one of these batteries to provide the energy that we need. But if we think about this orchestration of resources, having distributed energy across a city allows us to, through the internet, create what's called a virtual power plant. And now we can connect a bunch of little batteries, and then if there's an event where the power plant cannot meet the demand, instead of firing another coal power plant, for example, just for that peak, we can actually dispatch energy storage from batteries through the internet with a response that is hundreds of times faster, more efficient, and more economic than the traditional way of doing it. And again, that's a perfect example of how the Internet of Things as a system is being able to provide some resilience to the grid. And all of these solutions are not futuristic. These are all deployed today. Of course, more work needs to be done to make it at scale, but this technology exists today. Now, if we think about the life cycle of this type of critical infrastructure solutions, well, another aspect that's important is maintenance. For us to make sure that we're going to have the availability of energy so that we don't have to fire another power plant and continue with the air pollution, well, we're going to make sure that they stay up as much as possible. Wind turbines, for example, have all these bearings and these mechanical parts. And if we are able to add sensors and edge analytics to these wind turbines, we could predict when maintenance is needed. That way, we can schedule support for them, we can order the parts, and we can make sure that we don't lose the power generation that that particular wind farm was doing. And all of that is possible because we have the Internet of Things. We have the sensors, we have the analytics, we have the connectivity to be able to provide those type of innovative services, and businesses are actually being born out of the need of producing predictive maintenance, and they're expanding this type of offering for their customers. Another example is if you're thinking about maintaining some of these big infrastructure systems, sometimes it can be hard to reach or it can be dangerous for humans. So why not leverage other type of IoT technology? Autonomous drones can be dispatched to verify and do a visual inspection, let's say of a wind turbine, to see if it needs maintenance. This drone, it's another internet-connected device. It has connectivity, it has sensors, which in this case would be a streaming camera. It sends all the data to the cloud for us to do the analytics. So it's a perfect example of leveraging yet another element of the Internet of Things to provide maintenance. Now, these solutions don't have to be siloed. For example, if the turbine detects that it's going to need service in the near future, instead of messaging an operator, it can dispatch automatically a drone to do the next level of analysis. And that's how all those systems start fitting together. Now, I've talked about the generation of electricity, how IoT can help, a couple of examples about maintenance. But what about the consumption? The fact that we're going to generate more electricity doesn't mean that we don't have to be careful about not wasting it. Today, about 50% of the consumption of electricity comes from buildings. Well, what if we can use the Internet of Things here as well? By adding sensors to the buildings to determine whether there's people in the different rooms, by having occupancy analysis, or talking to the energy efficient systems and controlling the air conditioning of a building, we can not only control the different aspects that consume energy of the building, but also we can think about multiple buildings together. What's going on in the city at the time? Maybe there's a big concert and certain areas of the city need different types of power, and so other areas of the city can actually adjust their level of consumption. And that exists today as well. Utilities are able to send signals to buildings and tell them, hey, we are having a power issue, can you shut down your air conditioning for half an hour? And guess what? We're actually going to pay you for that. And so that's another area of revenue for these companies. So you can see how all the systems start fitting together. Now, the last example that I want to share with you has to do with electric vehicles. So making sure that we're not burning fossil fuels not only to produce energy, but also in our cars. And by the way, these cars are fully internet-connected vehicles today. They have a lot of sensors, they produce a lot of data, they do a lot of computing at the edge, they send all that data to the cloud. And the whole infrastructure, it's actually connected. So things like the charging stations, those charging stations are also IoT devices. They connect to the network, they can talk to the cars, they can talk to the transit systems, they can talk to utilities and figure out when is the best time to produce energy, to adjust the cost of energy, etc. So as you can see, all these different solutions exist, and they are part of the Internet of Things that we're building. And it's, of course, very different than the smart toaster. Now, one question that I often get is, well, how can I get involved? And that's a question that I had for many, many years myself, because it may seem that unless you work at a solar company or at a wind turbine company, you really can't have that effect in helping some of these issues that I'm talking about. But the reality is that these systems are so complex that we need all the help we can get in order to build them. And what I mean by that is that a typical IoT solution has these 5 components, conceptually. So every IoT solution, whether it's a smart refrigerator, a wind turbine, an autonomous vehicle, a drone, they will have a component of device hardware. That's where you have your sensors, your embedded computing, maybe some data storage. They will also have some device software, some analytics running in the device itself, maybe something as simple as just piping the data up to the cloud, or you can actually run artificial intelligence on those devices. Then, of course, is the connectivity to the cloud to make sure that all the data can be sent out to the cloud and processed. The cloud platform that offers all the storage capabilities, analysis, etc. And of course, the applications that we're going to build to display all this value to our customers. And all form factors play a role here. Depending on the application, it could be desktop applications, web applications, wearables, even augmented reality, virtual reality, all of those play a part in this ecosystem. And as you can imagine, no single company can develop this full solution themselves. It is very complicated. So IoT, it's an ecosystem play. We need to work together and partner with these companies to make sure that we provide the value for the full solution stack. For example, at Ericsson, we are experts in the communication portion. We power the networks that deliver the data in some of the most important cellular technologies like NB-IoT, 4G, 5G, etc. And although we do have technology components throughout the rest of the stack, that is what we're known for. So when we are working with utilities or transportation companies providing these solutions, we partner with companies like Intel or ARM or Dell at the edge, or Microsoft or Linux type companies at the device software, or with the big cloud players like Google and Amazon and Microsoft again, in order to provide this full solution. And this is really where the opportunity lies for all these technology companies like yourselves, because we need all the different components. So maybe your company provides a billing solution. Well, that is needed in this system. Or maybe you focused on vision recognition algorithms. Well, those are going to be needed. Or maybe it's a blockchain solution. Or maybe it's reporting for something else. So there is an opportunity for you to work with this type of solutions and find new channels of revenue for your company. Because the interesting thing about these types of solutions that I mentioned are not only helping us address climate change, but because they're growing, it's literally green field for us to increase share in the market and really help our companies grow. And so before I leave here, I would like to leave you with a question. I would love for you to go back to your company and talk to your company about what we discussed here and ask the question, how can my company grow by leveraging the IoT to address climate change? Because that is the question. How can you provide some technology blocks and leverage all the work that is being done, not only in energy that I talked today, but the similar situation is happening in agriculture, in transportation, in smart cities, smart buildings, healthcare. And so how could you collaborate? And remember, I believe that as technologists, we have a responsibility not only to create value for our customers and our company, but also to figure out how is it that we can leverage our technology to solve some of the biggest problems that we have in the world today. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, hands together for Daniel Elizalde.